Poland and the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. They said they plan to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention about banning anti-personnel mines. According to Reuters news agency, in a joint statement published recently, defense ministers of the four countries stressed military threats for the member states of the organization, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, shared borders with Russia and Belarus have increased significantly. In a separate statement, Minister of Defense of Lithuania, Dovilė Sokolynė, indicate plans to withdraw from the convention to effectively protect the borders of the region. International Convention on the Prohibition of Anti-Personnel Mines, adopted 1977, forbids use of storage, production and transfer of anti-personnel mines. So far, 164 countries have joined the convention. Russia and the United States has not. According to Reuters, Poland and the three Baltic states withdrew from the Ottawa Convention. These countries are starting to stockpile anti-personnel mines again. This month, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said Warsaw will begin taking steps to leave the convention. The four countries have long considered withdrawing. They want to make a lot of decisions. Countries of the European Union warned withdrawal from the Ottawa Treaty could have a domino effect with other global agreements. The statement of the four countries was made only a few months ago after the US administration under former President Biden to send mines into Ukraine and declare that this is a military decision. Deployed more troops. The infantry attacked before the tanks or other vehicles coming in. Although Kiev is also a signatory to the Ottawa Treaty, the country has notified the other parties in the treaty that they'll make exceptions to the occupied territories. German news agency DVK further commented that was also made at a sensitive time when Ukraine and Russia may be nearing a more permanent end for the conflict. It lasted for 3 years. Reaction to the move of Poland and BA regional. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Russia will take military and technical measures to ensure national security. Mrs. Zakharova stressed the efforts of Poland and the Baltic states to withdraw from the Ottawa Treaty will lead to an escalation of tensions in Europe, weakening the situation in the field of international security in the region. Russia will take retaliatory steps to ensure national defense and security, including the use of military technical options. According to the Russian task agency, the EU's response to BOS initiative, LAN and the Baltic countries up to the present time, still limited. These four countries' decisions are not just a security issue, it's also a political issue, can lead to further escalation in the region. After US President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Whitaker, hope for real progress related to the ceasefire in the Black Sea. During the Ukrainian peace talks between the US and Russia, the Kremlin has lowered expectations of rapid progress. He said there are still problems to be solved. The talks in the Saudi capital Riyadh focus on the technical aspects of monitoring the 30-day ceasefire to prevent attacks into the energy infrastructure, after the parties have accused the other party after the American effort to expand the agreement to include cargo operations in the Black Sea. Whitcomb told Fox News that he expects to make some real progress, especially when it affects the Black Sea ceasefire for ships of both countries. And from there, the parties will naturally move towards a complete ceasefire. However, the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, has raised Russia's complex demands around the Black Sea Initiative 2022 and 2023 to allow shipments of 5 cups of Ukraine to pass through safely. Here's another sign that Moscow's strategy is to be cautious, to slow down negotiations without outright rejection, while maintaining its tough conditions for a complete ceasefire. Ivory abandoned the 5-cup deal in July 2023, claims that their requirements have never been met. Mr. Peskov said, "Look, General, of course there are many different aspects. The deal needs to be resolved." He commented, Black Sea Initiative in its former form, implying certain obligations to the Russian Federation, but they didn't work. In the 2023 negotiations on the 5-cup initiative, Russia says that the country's agricultural exports, it was stopped by the West, even if not punished. Since Russia abandoned that deal, Ukraine continues to export 5 cups through the Black Sea and avoid the threat of Russian attacks by letting our ships operate closer to shore. Meanwhile, the country has also launched attacks by drone into Russia's Black Sea fleet, claims to have destroyed a third of Moscow's ships, including the battleship Moskova. Russia has used its ships in the Black Sea to launch cruise missiles against Ukraine. Russian foreign policy analyst Fyodor Lukyanov, given that the Kremlin seems satisfied the way the Trump administration handled negotiations and judgments, everything is going according to the Russian script, the success of President Vladimir Putin in rejecting Trump's demand for a complete ceasefire. It's part of Russia's strategy to slow down the peace talks. This expert said the Kremlin has dampened the White House's momentum from the talks in Jeddah and turned the discussion into a persistent exchange. According to Mr. Moskova, believe this is for their own good now. At the same time, take note of the action is now in Russia. A document prepared for the Kremlin last month by an influential research group in Moscow, close to the Federal Security Agency. Russia revealed a peaceful solution to the Ukrainian crisis. It can't happen before 2026, and discussed the need for the complete dissolution of the Ukrainian government. Currently, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman, Maria Zakharova, it also lowers expectations of rapid progress. Zakharova told Russian media that we don't have to wait very much for breakthroughs. It's about understanding that work is going on in many directions. This is one of them. The Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov emphasized Moscow's constant hardline stance, say that Russia will always pay attention to the solution to the problem. The state remains under the control of the Kiev regime. I've reused this expression as part of an effort to overthrow the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, and his government. He claims that his leadership is illegal. In recent days, information from many different sources show Ukraine continue to resist and control about 80 square kilometers of territory in the Kursk region. The problem is more important. Russian military does not launch a strong offensive to completely wipe out Ukrainian forces from the Kursk border area. Here are the theories that explain Russia's strategy. The first hypothesis is a green key consumption trap. The possibilities are Russian commanders are adopting a similar tactic on the banks of the Donetsk River. For almost a year, Ukraine decides to hold the landing bridge in the creek, leading to 7 serious human resource losses, including elite units 5 to 1,024. Ukraine finally withdraw all forces from the area without achieving any strategic benefit. Currently, the Kiev is still deploying reserve forces to try to keep what little territory was left in Kursk. There is an opportunity to inflict attrition on Ukrainian forces and raiding enemy reinforcements in the Sumy area. There are a number of other factors that can affect the strategic nature of Russia. The recent Ukrainian offensive in the Belgorod region. This may have forced the Russian military to divert some of the forces from Kursk to Belgorod to block the enemy's advance. The Russian military needs more preparation by speed through OU. Border between Russia and the Sumy region of Ukraine, stretching more than 560 kilometers. The Russian military needs to maintain a substantial along the border to prevent any future raids from happening. Maybe even after months of fighting, most of the Russian forces are in Kursk, has been withdrawn to the rear for rest, leaving just enough force to control the situation. It's not enough to launch more attacks. NGA may not want to completely repel the enemy from the There was no plan to expand the front to the west. To create a buffer zone, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has directed the military to build a buffer zone in the region of Ukraine to bolster security in the Quakers. Ultimately, the political factor cannot be ruled out. Negotiations between the United States and Ukraine on a ceasefire agreement still ongoing. Reclaimed most of the territory but leave 80 square kilometers. This gives Russia a basis to continue large-scale military operations. According to analysts, there are many factors contributing to Russia's success in the campaign to retake Kursk. One of them is the presence of the large number of North Korean soldiers. After the fighting time, they've learned a lot of lessons, experience on the battlefield, and it's becoming more and more efficient. Another factor is the US suspension of military aid, and especially stop sharing intelligence. The Ukrainian army, you can't get the important information, the location of Russian forces. But according to a Russian engineer, a Russian military blogger, the main difference lies in the drones. This success is due to the shift from quantity to the quality of the drone, along with all other forces and means of support. Can say Russian troops have mastered the strategy of isolating the battlefield with the help of drones. Russia has cut off supplies of Ukrainian forces and leave the enemy no choice, apart from retreating. This is evident in the large number of videos attack with a Russian drone, including the use of drones by the Moscow ambush the side of the road to attack approaching convoys. Fiber optic drone needs interconnect. For less energy, they can operate in one location for a long time. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation about released the attack on the destruction of the Ofu Leopard tanks in the direction. UAV pilot Alexander Bolesky. He told me how he destroyed one of the tanks Leopard of the Ukrainian side. After the first drone launch, the soldiers forced the tanks to stop. Then the second one crashed into the turret and completely destroyed the tank. Army-controlled drone attack FPPV and UAV suicide set of central troops daily destroying the armored vehicles, including foreign-made vehicles, as well as ammunition fortified depots, positions and enemy manpower. Russian soldiers. He has been successful many times in breaking the rules and counterattack efforts. Earlier, the Russian military destroyed the Baba Yoga UAV of in Jacob area. The moment this UAV was destroyed was also captured by the camera. According to statistics from the Russian Ministry of Defense, has suffered heavy losses since the start of the campaign in Kursk, especially to mention the 7 damage of tanks. According to official estimates of this agency, in the fighting on the border, Ukraine lost 400 tanks. Even so, there are no images to confirm the above statistics. Russian military officials said impressive number. It was announced in the last weeks of May. It reflects the scale of military operations. It takes place near national borders with Ukraine and stressed the intensity of the clashes. Happened for over 6 months. This number is not the final number because fighting continues in the area and some armored vehicles. The destruction has not been clearly identified. A large number of damage 7 is related to successful Russia's northern war. As of 2024, against the efforts of the Ukrainian armed forces to gain a foothold on Russian territory. Tank vehicles that form the backbone of the armored force. It has become one of the main objectives of the unit, Russian Air Force and drones. However, the exact distribution of the destroyed vehicles by type and origin still not clear because the problem of statistics is due to the tense fighting situation. Experts believe that among the lost tanks, there's also the Soviet tanks that Ukraine inherited and patents modern MBT provided by Western allies. These include the German Leopard 2 tank and the American M1 The loss of 400 tanks, according to Russian reports. It's not just data on the effectiveness of the Russian armed forces, as evidence about the strategic importance of the Quaker direction for both sides in the conflict. In the coming time, fighting in the Russian territories will continue, not just at Kursk. That the current wartime land to Belgorod shows the great complexity of the situation. Ukrainian President Zelensky announced last week, Russia is preparing a new attack on Sumy province, bordering Kuwait province. According to the Moscow Times, Zelensky's statement was made as Russian troops continue to repel Ukrainian troops in the Quaks, where the KF once controlled part of the territory, since launching a surprise attack across the border in August of last year. After Ukrainian forces withdrew from Susa in the middle of the and moved back to Sumy, it is likely that Russia will launch a new attack on Sumy province. The experts identified the target is forcing Ukraine to disperse its forces and reducing power on the main front. Russia sees the return of Kuwait as an important victory, and President Putin has proposed set up a buffer zone to protect this area from attacks in the future. After your statement, there have been reports of a potential attack Russia in this direction. Military Russia made small incursions into the Sumy region earlier this month. It seems to be aimed at control important supply routes of Ukraine. Ukraine's withdrawal from Kuwait. The Ukrainian analyst, Alexei Hetman, claims that Ivory has deployed more units. This includes the motorized brigade and artillery batteries along the border to prepare for a major attack. The Hetman said, currently the forces are stationed there. This includes 6 combat air and naval units. More likely, they'll find a way to get to Sumy and invade our territory from the north. Whether they're successful or not is another question. But they will try. However, the Ukrainian military analyst Ivan Sterpak again argued that both Ukrainian intelligence and analysts open-source intelligence integration, there was no sign of preparation for a large-scale attack on Sumy. Sterpak told the Moscow Times, currently, no, I can say that somewhere deep inside the territory, Moscow has assembled a force of 200,000 people and that an attack would start tomorrow. Question about Mr. Zelensky's exact intentions. It's still controversial. So far there has been no confirmation of his claim about an imminent attack. Meanwhile, the clashes It's been reported in border areas. March 18th, pro-Russian military telegram channels reported on an attempted incursion by Ukrainian
from
forces
Sumy
into the Belgorod region of Russia, bordered by Koksk. The Russian Defense Ministry
The
attack in Bangkok was confirmed and claimed that it's been pushed back. Stupok said that the attack on Belgorod, it may be aimed at diverting Russia's attention from Sumy. He noted that Russian military forces along the border Sumy can be up to 60,000 people, although most of these forces only perform logistics and support tasks. According to Mr. Stupok, a potential Russian attack on Sumy may be aimed at making it difficult for Ukrainian struggling with a human resource shortage, cause more damage to Kiev, and move deeper into the country's territory. He argued that, even control only a small part of Sumy, Russia can also be used as a card to negotiate in future peace talks. Ukraine, meanwhile, has rushed to strengthen its defences in Sumy. 2024's Ministry of Defence Ukraine has reported on building of concrete shelters for military personnel, anti-tank barriers and trenches. Location and scale. The exact nature of these structures has not been revealed by Moskvatoms on 5/2024. Russian troops have attacked the Kokov region of Ukraine. It borders Sumy and occupies part of its territory. Ukraine has built fortifications, but some are not finished, leading to criticism from the public. This is not the first time Russia has targeted after Sumy arriving here in February 2022 and withdrew in April of the same year. Stupok noted if Russia continues to attack Sumy, they're going to face a Ukrainian force is carefully prepared with the help of Western intelligence, and it is difficult to unload armoured vehicle scale due to the risk of being attacked by drones. Negotiations between senior officials of the Federation to focus on the resolution of the Ukrainian maritime security in the Black Sea in the Saudi capital of Riyadh. After more than 12 hours of discussion, the two news agencies of the Russian Federation are RIA Novosti and TASS, sources from this country. A joint statement on the expected talks. It will be announced on March 25th. For my part, according to RT, the Russian Foreign Ministry released a short video. It shows that the country's negotiating team is leaving the US-Russia consultation is over. KID indicates, but does not provide any other details. Grigory Karasin, a veteran diplomat and president Foreign Affairs Committee of the Federal Russian Senate. He is also a member of the country's delegation. He described the talks in Riyadh as innovative, but it's also technical. Karasin told reporters, during a break between discussion sessions, not every negotiation leads to a document or deal. Highlight the important thing. It is important to keep in touch and understand each other's positions. In this respect, we are getting results. The discussion is over. It's mainly about maritime security in the Black Sea and the ability to revive the Black Sea initiative. It's often called a five-level agreement, brokered by the United Nations and Turkey. The Russian Federation withdrew from the agreement on July 2023. The reason is that the West is not living up to its commitments. The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said earlier in the day, if you recall the original version of the agreement, there are important obligations on our part. It's never been done. It's still part of the agenda. Petrov also explained that US President Donald Trump came up with the idea of reconsidering this agreement as part of efforts to reach a ceasefire between Moscow and Kiev. Previously, on March 23rd, White House National Security Advisor he told CBS News that the US, Russia and Ukraine gathered in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. According to Mr. Myo, outside the ceasefire in the Black delegates Sea will discuss the boundary of control Russia and Ukraine. Besides, Mr. that confidence-building options are being discussed. The above information appears in the context of the US president efforts to end the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Its third year. Last week, the US leader also spoke to the Ukrainian Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin. A Reuters source said, senior director at the White House National Security Council and State Department official Anton, the leaders of the US delegation in the negotiations. They met with the Ukrainian delegation on March 23rd. The Russian delegation was headed by the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Federal Russian Council, Grigory Karasin and Mr. Sheki Beseda, advisor to the director of the Russian Federal Security Representative, FSB. A few days ago, the Hill quoted US President Donald Trump as saying, land-sharing contracts between Russia and Ukraine under negotiation, and to reiterate that there will be a ceasefire soon. The president spoke to the press at the White House. They're fighting each other. I think we are about to have a ceasefire in many areas, and so far it's all been going really well. Russia controls nearly 20% of Ukrainian territory by 2022. Russia unilaterally annexes for Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhzhia from Ukraine. Even though we don't have full control of these provinces, Ukraine does not recognize the annexation, as well as for the Crimea Peninsula in 2014. Former Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine, Andriy Reva, told Priambi TV channel that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are prepared to accept the terms of surrender from President Biden Trump. The Ukrainian leadership has agreed that we will withdraw, even though they say the opposite. Former minister noted that the conditions proposed to the Kiev surrender included renunciation of territorial claims, give up your NATO membership, Ukrainian military solution. Mr. Reva, he stressed that the only negotiations are ongoing with Washington. It's about ensuring Mr. Zelensky's personal security and those close to him. Previously, Alexander Dubinsky, a member of the Ukrainian parliament, it was predicted that Zelensky would flee to South Africa. Meanwhile, the New York Times recently reported Ukrainian forces has withdrawn almost entirely from the Russian quacks. After 7 months of fighting, a Ukrainian soldier painfully admitted it all ended at quacks. Back to the 8th of June 2024. The Ukrainian armed forces have made both Russia and the surprising Western analysis as we march lightning fast across the border. Penetration into more than 800 square kilometers of the Houth area. The attack took the Russian military by surprise. But Ukrainian territory doesn't have much strategic significance. Antigua comments, if the Ukraine attack achieve any benefit immediately, it's a little confusing, as well as surprise for the Russian government. And it's got some short-term propaganda benefits in the country as well as in the West. It also gives you a mental boost. Not much for the military and the people. Ukraine is used to dismal news from the front lines. After 7 defeats of the counterattack in the summer of 2023, but like in so many battles in this war, as well as many battles in Russian and Soviet history, this country's armed forces have always been changing circumstances. The Russians then moved quickly to conduct an effective counterattack to knock Ukrainian forces out of the water. It's clearly the last stage of the Kursk campaign. It is not easy for Ukraine. Just a few days ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin. This suggests that the Ukrainian army is now completely isolated in Kursk. He also hinted that escape was becoming increasingly impossible. Although the president, Volodymyr Zelensky, claims that Putin is lying, the Ukrainian army firmly declared units in the area of Kuwait not under siege. In an interview with the BBC, a Ukrainian soldier fighting here, I honestly admit, it all ended in Kuwait. Ukrainian soldiers reveal more. Logistics is no longer effective. The delivery includes weapons and ammunition. Food and water are no longer possible. According to anti-war clearly, Ukraine has not achieved any of the above objectives, but pay a terrible price. Despite the incredible success of invasion into the guts of Ukraine, was quickly stopped by the Russian armed forces. Instead of diverting Russian troops and weapons from the Donbas, the Ukrainian invasion of Kursk had the opposite effect. The best trained and equipped soldiers of the force armed Ukraine had to divert from the Donbas front. They were sent to Kursk to occupy territory, or simply hold some territory that they can't control indefinitely while Ukrainian forces are tied up. Kursk gradually pushed back, with 7 growing losses on people and advanced military equipment. Russian forces quickly took advantage of this. The Russians exploited Ukraine's weak defenses in the Donbas and further west. They've stepped up attacks, further weakening of Ukraine's defense system along the front, and seized more territory in the Donbas. Indeed, bringing the best trained and equipped troops to the Kursk. In the end, they couldn't bring Ukraine anything apart from the terrible price in terms of both life and equipment. Despite the initial surprise and now confusion, President Putin can enjoy the feeling. Liberated Russian territory from Ukraine. It has been described as an existential threat to Russia before and from the beginning of the war. Newsweek magazine in a recent analysis warned Donald's policies, Trump could lead to a split in NATO. Even if the US doesn't officially leave the military North Atlantic Ocean, many experts and analysts in the New York reference, I am concerned that Trump will undermine NATO unity through both formal and informal mechanisms. From there, the future of the military alliance, largest in the world, special according to David Bratton. Associate Professor of International Security and Strategy. President Trump, there will be no need to withdraw the United States from the alliance with a simple operation. That's what the White House means. We'll refuse to implement Article 5 of the NATO Charter. It's a collective defense guarantee. Then the Allies' trust in the bloc will collapse. Mr. Blackburn commented, if the US government is clear about its intentions, they have no intention of defending their allies if attacked, the credibility of NATO will really crumble. The expert said, this informal approach is simpler and faster compared to the complicated process of seceding from NATO. It requires approval from the US Congress. Newsweek magazine also predicted there are steps that can be taken by Trump. That includes cuts to general operations or withdraw American troops from Europe. This will cause numbness, coordination among the members of the Union. Upon taking office for a second term, President Trump has made his point. America above all, the US should not shoulder too much responsibility in international alliances. He's constantly criticizing the European allies for not contributing enough to the defense budget and rely too much on the light of the US military. Trump has also bluntly stated, if European countries don't contribute more, the United States will not continue to defend these countries. Continued questioning of common responsibility. This is accompanied by a reduction in military engagements from the US with their allies. Not only that, the Trump administration, it's changing its approach for the conflicts they're involved in. In a recent vote at the United Nations, the United States has opposed condemning Russia for the conflict in Ukraine. This is in stark contrast to NATO policy. In foreign affairs, the Trump administration is prioritizing bilateral instead of multilateral. This reduces the collective power of NATO in addressing regional security issues, typical as a personal relationship, US and Turkey on the South issue, or the United States completely abandoning its outside European allies. Direct talks with Russia recently. Even though American diplomats assured Europe, Trump remains committed to maintaining his NATO membership. And the fifth thing about collective defense, many European allies are concerned about the White House cut back on military deployments or equipment, or reduce participation in NATO joint missions. Belgian Foreign Minister Prévost that the European Union, we need a strong strategy to deal with the US President's tariff war. Donald Trump, Belgium's top diplomat, stressed the EU must respond with proportionate force to confirm that this market of 150 million people, they deserve to be treated differently the way Trump has done so far. In a recent interview with Politico, Prévost said, the EU should not rule out any measures when responding to Mr. Trump, including targeting Washington's weaknesses. Prévost proposed to use technological advantage as a seven. It is important to note that EU regulations for these digital platforms, it's one of the most sensitive issues for America, can be an effective counterattack tool. Prévost said, we understand the field of digital technology is one of the sensitive points and could provoke a strong reaction. So I support it. Take advantage of this as part of your strategy. Respond. EU technology regulations became part of the tariff war. Across the Atlantic, previous social media platforms, X is owned by billionaire Elon Musk, Mr. Trump's senior advisor. They are facing penalties from the EU for violating social media regulations. Trump has also threatened to retaliate if the EU continues to tighten control. American technology companies, suggested Mr. Prévost. Given in context, the EU is facing internal divisions over how to respond before Mr. Trump's tariff policies, while the European Commission efforts to step up tariffs on US exports. Some countries like France and Germany, Ireland and Italy are very cautious. It makes this process more complicated, Mr. Prévost said. He wanted to attack individual countries instead of working with the EU as a unified entity. White House tariff policy. It also has a profound impact on the defense sector. These agreements have recently become the focus of concerned debate that Washington can impose limits on performance, along with broader concerns of the overdependence of Europe into American weapons. Prévost admitted that Belgium may not be strong enough to operate a squadron. There are many different types of fighters, but stressed that Europe's defense autonomy, it's something that needs to be taken seriously. Outside the German foreign minister, we also support the activation of the US anti-coercive mechanism that allows this to impose retaliatory trade measures to fight discrimination from the United States. He warned of a tariff war. It's like a boomerang being thrown away. We've got to do it for people who use tariffs. Make weapons remember that they will come back sooner or later. US President Donald Trump said that any country that buys oil or gas from Venezuela, they will all be taxed at 25%
on trade transactions with the United States.
On social networks Facebook, Mr. Trump confirmed this tax will take effect from 2 quarters. When announcing this tax, Trump did not provide evidence, but claims that Venezuela deliberately sent criminals to the US, including violent individuals and
gang
members
like
of the Aragua. These tariffs are likely to increase the burden. Taxes on China. The country has bought 68% of Venezuela's oil exports. By 2023, the U.S. Energy Information Administration's 2024 report. It also shows Spanish Indian girl, Russia, Singapore is also among the oil importing countries. From Venezuela, however, even the U.S. has imposed sanctions on Venezuela. We buy oil from this country. According to U.S. statistics, in January, the U.S. has imported 86 million barrels of oil from Venezuela, of about 102 million barrels that month. Venezuela has the world's top crude oil supply. It also has the largest amount of natural gas in South America. Of this country, it's largely dependent on energy exports. These tariffs don't seem to be just about a blow to Venezuela, but also into China, America's main economic rival. It's the largest consumer of energy products. Venezuela at a cabinet meeting at the White House. Mr. Trump said he's also going to apply perspective to medicine. Cars and aluminum are Trump's latest announcements. It's a continuation of his pressure campaign for Venezuela. In the first term, from 2017 to 2021, Trump has launched a maximum pressure campaign to impose heavy sanctions for this South American country. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan government, they also opposed the new U.S. tax policy. According to AP 24/3, President of Venezuela Nicolas Maduro, we call this secondary tax arbitrary, illegal and ineffective to hinder the growth of this South American country. He claimed for years the right has pushed for economic sanctions in the hope of making Venezuela subdued. They lost 7 because Venezuela is a sovereign country. Because the people of this country have been resilient with dignity and for the world today, no longer subdued before any form of economic dictatorship. According to CNN, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Venezuela also wrote on Telegram that the US is seeking to repeat its coercive measures to curb Venezuela's growth, a strategy that the country claims has failed 7 times. The Post emphasized, they couldn't and won't stop us. The maximum pressure policy has failed in Venezuela and all over the world. Venezuela, they also warned that they will take all necessary action before international organizations to oppose the measure.